This is Radio Health Journal. I'm Nancy Benson. This week, why athletes are among the most superstitious people on earth.
These rituals that emerge also have a nice psychological function as they make them feel better. They fill the time with something that is routine and predictable.
How a little superstition can help win the Super Bowl when Radio Health Journal returns.
I'm Reed Pence, the producer and host of Radio Health Journal. If you like listening to Radio Health Journal, you'll also like our sister show, Viewpoints, which covers a wide array of topics from education to history to the environment. Here's a preview of what they're covering this week on Viewpoints.
So upon first looking at the programs, parents are oftentimes and understandably tricked into believing this is a safe environment, but what goes on beyond those doors is a far different story.
The darker side of inpatient youth rehabilitation. Then,
it was a real struggle for investigators before they were able to team up with forensic scientists.
The birth of the American CSI. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
Listen to Radio Health Journal and Viewpoints on your favorite radio station. And subscribe and listen anytime on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Also, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Radio Health Journal.
Professional athletes will do just about anything to get an edge over an opponent, especially in a big game like the Super Bowl. Players lift weights just a little harder and study film a little longer. And one more thing, they make sure their lucky socks are ready to wear. When it comes to being superstitious, athletes top just about everyone. They take it seriously. No one in the locker room would ever make fun of a teammate's treasured rituals.
It's a common thing for athletes because they are engaged in an activity for which the stakes are very high, especially professional athletes. They have large salaries riding on their performance, and everyone is watching. And yet the activity itself is somewhat unpredictable. The outcome is not clear. And once they've sort of done everything that they reasonably can do to prepare, they still hope to eke out some additional bit of control over the outcome. So superstitions emerge in that circumstance.
That's Dr. Stuart Vise, author of Believing in Magic, The Psychology of Superstition. He says an athlete's lucky charms get lots of attention just before kickoff.
An athlete might engage in a ritual as they're getting prepared for the contest, getting dressed in the locker room or whatever, some kind of dressing thing that they do or other ritual. And part of that is that obviously they can't practice at that moment. They can't do anything that will actually change their performance in any meaningful way. But there's still time that needs to be filled, and they're also quite anxious because the contest is coming up. So these rituals that emerge or superstitions that they engage in also have a nice psychological function as they make them feel better. They pass the time. They fill the time with something that is routine and predictable.
Some NFL stars believe they play better if they eat specific foods just before the game. Others have performance rituals. One pro bowler, for example, used to demand he be slapped hard in the face by one of the team's trainers before kickoff. And one NFL team reportedly traded for a certain player primarily because the head coach thought he was a good luck charm. Sound crazy? Well, believe it or not, sometimes superstitious rituals actually work. Dr. Alex Lickerman is author of The Undefeated Mind.
The context in which it seems to work is where the outcome that you're working on is to some degree under your own control, because the mechanism by which it seems to work is by actually increasing your confidence, which apparently seems to increase persistence. So in the study that I'm referring to, which was published in 2010, what they found was that subjects who were actually allowed to perform the researchers' task that they had set them to do, who were given lucky charms, did better because they persisted more. They kept going, which the researchers identified was caused by their increased confidence due to their lucky charm.
In other words, if you think you're going to play better, you will. Vise says that German scientists tested this confidence theory by having a large number of people play one hole of miniature golf.
Some people were brought in and said, here's your ball, go to work, and they would play. But other people randomly were told, this ball has been lucky today. And simply saying that the ball had been lucky that day, was enough that that group of people scored better, made more putts on the carpet than the group who had simply been handed the ball. So there is something to it. There is something that the mere suggestion of something beyond the normal being involved does seem to give some people more confidence and improve their performance. There's no question on a basic psychological level that these superstitions do have a positive effect for the individual. They make them feel better, they help them cope with anxiety, and they may give them more confidence in a performance situation where they're attempting to do something.
However, if a person's performance has nothing to do with the outcome, superstitions mean nothing. Sports fans would like to think their lucky T-shirts and victory couches will help their teams win, but even if they don't, Vise says that doesn't make them worthless.
For many people, the performance of their team is tied up in their own identity, and it's very important to them. And there's a lot of bonding among fans that to be a fan of a particular team becomes a part of one's identity. And so these superstitions, particularly that fans engage in prior to the Super Bowl or other contests, have that social value to them as well. And in some cases, they know it's crazy, but it still has these positive aspects of bonding and being a sort of a direct expression of your wish that the team will win.
Even advertising campaigns tap into our pervasive belief in superstitions. After all, the commercials say they're not crazy if they work.
50% of Americans, by some studies, actually are superstitious and believe in it. So they're obviously going after a very large demographic there. And even people in general who aren't superstitious, who don't think of themselves as superstitious, are often unconsciously superstitious, worrying about things like walking under a ladder or things that might happen on Friday the 13th. We seem to be hardwired to find patterns where often there are none, and I think that also contributes a lot to our belief in superstition.
We do look for patterns like that. That is our nature. That the reason why we've been so successful as a species is because we can see patterns and learn from experience. And so we often see patterns when they can't reasonably be there. So that is the circumstances. Many of these superstitions arise out of coincidence. You take some action and then the outcome you're looking for happens. And so suddenly that's stamped in and becomes a special relationship in your mind. Many superstitions have developed that way, where something salient is done on one occasion, it produces a particular outcome, and suddenly it's like, I've got to do it every time now.
Superstitions are most likely to spring up when people feel exposed or out of control over what happens to them. That's why fishermen and actors worry about having good luck, but make sure they don't mention it. Vise says people who are anxious or depressed are also more likely to be superstitious. College students are big believers in good luck too, but only around exam time. Vise says most of the time superstitions are harmless. But no matter how irrational they are, superstitions will never go away because they satisfy a major psychological need.
The basic need for control and predictability in your life, and not knowing what's going to happen in situations that matter is in and of itself enough to create anxiety and worry. And superstitions serve a purpose in that they help you deal with that worry and that concern for the future. It's a universal thing. Not everyone will choose superstition as their way of coping with the uncertainties of life. Other people choose other methods. But we all are confronted from time to time with things that we want very badly either to happen or to not happen, and yet we can't control them. We can't predict whether they will happen or not.
So as the minutes wind down to the big game, you may be able to take some comfort. The rituals of even the most rabid fans aren't any stranger than what the players do to get ready for kickoff. You can find out more about all our guests on our website, radiohealthjournal.org. Our studio producer is Jason Dickey. I'm Nancy Benson. Coming up next week on Radio Health Journal.
What we did see are these kind of drag racing opportunities where we would see drivers speed through cities like they're in a video game.
How the pandemic has changed the way we drive.
Then vaccine passports, your ticket to getting back to normal without easily forged paper passes.
A flight departing from Moscow to China, where they grounded the flight because they realized that 200 passengers had produced the same negative COVID test certificate.
All that and more on Radio Health Journal.
And that's Radio Health Journal for this week. Radio Health Journal is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more. And check Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify for a library of past programs. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and information about our guests at radiohealthjournal.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Radio Health Journal.